From slave to sovereign, the human uncovered the alien girl's secret identity. The twin suns hung low over the black skies of Vetra Prime. The air was dry, hot, and full of smoke. Screams echoed between metal stalls, and chains clinked like music of misery. This was not a place for kindness. This was the market of chains where hope came to die, and slaves were sold like tools. Jace, a human engineer from Earth, walked carefully through the dusty paths between cages. His boots crunched on old bones and rusted bolts. He had come here on a job fixing a warlord's transport engine, but now the warlord had offered him payment, not in credits, but in property. She's quiet, doesn't bite, and still has all her limbs. The warlord had laughed. He pointed toward a metal cage, small and hidden in the corner. Inside, curled up and wrapped in rags, was an alien girl, thin, silent, and unmoving. She looked more like a ghost than a living being. Jace frowned. I asked for payment, not pity, but the warlord grinned, showing metal teeth. Trust me, human, this one's different. Then he leaned closer, his voice lower. She was picked up near the ruins of the royal temple. Jace raised an eyebrow. So? The warlord only shrugged. Just take her, or leave with nothing. Something about the girl made Jace pause, even with the dirt on her face and the fear in her eyes. There was a strange stillness in her. She didn't beg, she didn't cry. She only looked at him with eyes that burned like stars. Fine, Jace said at last. I'll take her. He unlocked the cage, and she slowly stepped out. Her legs shaky, but controlled. She didn't speak, just followed him like a shadow. The market guards stared, some even laughed. What's he gonna do with that trash? One muttered. She won't last a cycle, said another. Jace ignored them. He took her to his small cargo ship, docked just beyond the edge of the market. Inside it was quiet and clean, nothing like the world outside. She stood near the door, unsure, like a wild animal, unsure of freedom. What's your name? Jace asked, handing her a bottle of water. She stared at the bottle, then at him, then slowly took it and drank. I'm not here to hurt you, he said gently, but I'm not your master either. Still, she said nothing, just lowered her head. Later that night, after checking the ship's systems, Jace brought her a blanket, some food, and clean clothes. She hadn't moved much, still sitting near the corner, like she belonged there. As he handed her the food, she looked at him, and then softly spoke, Cathal, Indria. The words were in an old, dead dialect, one only found in ancient royal texts. Jace froze, his heart racing. How do you know that language? He asked. The girl's eyes widened, realizing she had made a mistake. She shook her head quickly, whispering, please. Forget you heard it. Jace stared at her, and something deep in his memory lit up. He had seen those words before on the royal crest of the fallen House Drea, the same house that was wiped out during the Great Purge. Years ago, no one had survived, or so everyone believed. He sat down across from her. Serious now, who are you? The girl hugged the blanket tighter around her, her voice shaking. My name is Alira, she whispered. I was born to the royal line. My family is dead, she continued. I was hidden, raised in silence, then captured by pirates when my protector was killed. Jace's mind raced. A royal, hidden in a slave cage. Why had no one noticed? Why had the warlord given her away so easily? Because he didn't know, and if others found out, they would come for her. You're not safe here, Jace said firmly, standing up. I didn't plan on taking anyone with me, but now I have no choice. If they know who you are, they'll chase you across the stars. Alira nodded slowly. They already have. As the ship engines warmed up, Jace checked his scanners, and there it was, a small stealth drone, hovering in orbit, watching. His jaw tightened. They're already here. Alira looked up, fear in her voice. What do we do? Jace looked at her. This girl once sold in chains, now holding the key to a lost royal bloodline. He didn't know why he cared, Maybe because he saw something in her that reminded him of Earth's past, of people who fought against impossible odds. We run, he said, flipping switches, but not forever, he added. One day, they'll know who you really are, and by then, you'll be ready. As the ship rose into the black sky, the market of chains disappeared beneath them, and the slave girl with royal blood took her first step toward the throne that was stolen from her. The stars outside the cockpit shimmered like dust on black velvet, but Jace wasn't admiring them. He was watching the scanner, eyes narrowed, heart heavy. The stealth drone had vanished, but that didn't mean they were safe. Alira sat silently behind him, still wrapped in the same blanket, her body small against a large pilot chair. She hadn't spoken again since revealing her name. He could feel her eyes on his back, but she didn't ask questions, didn't beg, didn't complain. She just watched, like someone used to hiding. Every part of themselves. They jumped through the first hypergate near the rim border, and Jace shut down all active signals, then turned to her. You need to tell me everything, he said. Who's chasing you, and why didn't they find you sooner? She hesitated, then slowly pulled back part of the blanket. Exposing her right shoulder, Jace leaned in, then stopped breathing. There, under the grime and faint scars, was a line of faded tattoos, glowing faintly blue in the low light, old ceremonial markings, the kind found only on royal-born children of the Drayan lineage. I was marked at birth, she whispered. It was supposed to be hidden forever. Jace touched a scanner to the ink and watched the results load on the screen. Royal Seal, House Drea, 99% match. The device confirmed. He backed away slowly. Mind racing. She wasn't lying. She couldn't be. Not with a scan this clear. You're not just royalty, he muttered. You're the heir. Her eyes looked down, ashamed. Not anymore, she said. They took my world. My mother died before my eyes. I was smuggled out inside a medical crate. Jace couldn't imagine it. A child royalty. Living like cargo, then surviving as a slave on backwater planets. I survived by forgetting who I was, Alira said softly. But when I saw you today, I thought maybe I could stop hiding. Jace didn't know what to say. But something inside him shifted. He had taken in a broken girl. But now he realized she was something far greater, something dangerous, and someone new. He tapped into the ship's darknet receiver, pulling up reports from bounty stations. There it was, a fresh bounty, recently uploaded wanted, Drayan, imposter. Reward, 1 million credits, dead or alive. Her face was on it, slightly older, more regal, but it was her. He turned the screen toward her and watched her reaction. She closed her eyes. They're afraid of me. They should be, Jace replied. You're not just a threat to their lies. You're proof that their rule is built on murder. Silence followed. Then Alira spoke, barely more than a whisper. I don't want revenge, she said. I just want peace. Peace doesn't come free, Jace answered. But maybe we can buy it with the truth. He walked to the med bay and returned with antiseptic and cloth. You don't have to live like a shadow anymore, he said, as he gently cleaned the dirt from her face and arms. She flinched at first, then led him the tattoos underneath her skin now fully visible. More symbols appeared under her collarbone and near her neck. Each symbol glowed slightly, connected like circuits, telling a story only the old houses could read. She was never just a slave, Jace whispered to himself. She's a living piece of history. A warning light blinked red on the console. Long-range sensors had picked up a faint trace of an unknown ship jumping in from warp. Jace didn't hesitate. He activated stealth mode and dropped their speed. We've been followed, he said. Alira stood up, for the first time fully upright, her posture straight, like a trained noble. She didn't look scared, just tired. Then we stop running, she said, and start preparing. Jace blinked, surprised by her sudden change. You don't even know how to fight. I will learn, she replied. If I have to become a warrior to survive, I will. He nodded slowly. thinking hard. I know someone who can help, he said. An old outpost. Earth-built. Abandoned now. He pulled up the coordinates and changed course. You'll need training, weapons, and allies, he said, if you ever want to take back what's yours. Alira stepped beside him, looking at the stars. Ahead. I don't want a throne built on blood, she whispered. Jace looked at her. Then build one with fire, truth, and strength, outside. The stars began to blur again as the ship entered warp, but this time, they weren't running away. They were heading toward something. A throne lost in time, and a girl who was never meant to rise again, but would. Jace woke to silence, the kind of silence that wasn't peaceful but heavy, thick, and warning. The ship had dropped out of warp early, not by choice. Something had interfered. He jumped up from the bunk, grabbing his pulse sidearm and heading to the control panel. Alira was already there, sitting calmly, her hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the scanner. We've been pulled, she said quietly. What? She pointed. Gravity snare, artificial, out the front viewport. Space looked normal at first glance, but behind that illusion, Jace noticed a strange, chimera-cloaked object floating dead ahead. Before he could say anything, a voice crackled. Through the ships comes, smooth, confident, and cold, unidentified vessel. Lower shields, and prepare to be boarded. Alira's face changed, not to fear, but to fury. I know that voice, she whispered. That's Captain Renak. Jace tensed. Who? She looked at him, fire in her eyes now. The man who killed my older brother. Jace didn't wait. He flipped switches and charged the backup warp coils. But before the ship could escape, a high-pitched whine shook the hull. They were caught, hard. I need you to listen very carefully, Jace said. Go to the cargo hold. There's a false panel under the old crates. Hide inside it, and don't make a sound. I won't run again, she said. You're not running, he replied. You're waiting for the right moment. She hesitated, then nodded once, and disappeared down the hallway. The airlock hissed open 5 minutes later, and Jace stood in the middle of the bay, arms crossed, pulse weapon holstered but ready. 6 armored soldiers walked in, rifles raised, followed by a tall, silver-armored alien with a jagged scar running down one side of his face. Captain Renak. Human, Renak said, voice like oil. We've scanned your ship and detected no princess, but we know you've taken something from the market. Jace kept his tone flat. Yeah. A half-starved girl, who hasn't spoken since I picked her up. She spoke enough to get a bounty on her head. Renak sneered. Jace didn't flinch, but his fingers hovered near his hidden weapon control. You think she's royal? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Look at me. Do I look like someone who deals in politics? Renak stepped forward, eyes scanning every panel and wall. We'll search your ship, he said. Go ahead. Jace replied. Just don't break anything. She's barely eating as it is. The soldiers moved, spreading out, rifles at the ready, footsteps echoing through the metal halls. Inside the cargo hold, Alira held her breath in the dark panel space, her heart beating so loud, it felt like thunder. She could hear them outside, searching, walking closer. Suddenly, one of the crates fell with a loud crash, and Boots moved right next to her hiding spot. She closed her eyes, holding still. A whisper buzzed in her ear, Jace's voice, coming through a tiny cum chip he had slipped into her hand before she left. Don't move, he said softly. Just wait. Trust me. And then, gunfire. Not from the soldiers, but from the ship itself. Jace had triggered the internal defense system, old Earth tech he'd restored just for this reason. Non-lethal shock darts launched from hidden wall panels, zapping the invaders before they could fire a shot. Renak was the only one fast enough to duck. Avoiding the first volley, he roared and drew his blade, charging toward the control room. But Jace met him halfway. Not with a weapon, but with a punch. The two crashed into the wall, fists and elbows flying. Jace was smaller, but faster, and full of desperation. They rolled, struck, and bled, until finally, Jace slammed the crowbar into Rennick's chest plate. The alien groaned and dropped unconscious. The moment the ship went still, Aelira stepped out of hiding, her hands shaking. She walked past the stunned soldiers and toward Jace, who sat on the floor, breathing hard. "You said wait," she said quietly. "I told you I'd protect you," he replied with a tired smile. But something changed in her face, a quiet realization. She knelt beside Rennick, took a deep breath, and whispered something in her native tongue. Then she stood tall, taller than before. Something regal, returning to her presence. "We can't run anymore," she said. "I know," Jace replied, "and I don't think you want to." She shook her head. "Not after this." She looked down at Rennick's unconscious body. Then at Jace. "We make them afraid again," she said, "but this time for the right reasons." Jace nodded slowly. "Then it's time you stop hiding in rags and start rising like a queen." The old Earth outpost stood like a forgotten skeleton on a shattered asteroid, floating in the quiet dark between dead trade lanes, once a military training ground. Now it was abandoned, dusty, and silent. The kind of place that didn't exist on official maps anymore. Jace guided the ship in carefully, bypassing 3 broken defense systems before landing inside the rusted docking bay. As the ramp lowered, Aelira stepped out, her bare feet touching the metal floor. She looked around with wide eyes. This place wasn't beautiful. It wasn't royal. It was broken, but somehow, it felt right. Here, she could start again, away from the noise of bloodlines and bounty hunters. Jace opened the doors to the training hall, and dust rose into the stale air. Faded banners from Earth's military days still hung on cracked walls. He handed her a pulse staff. Too heavy for her small frame. She almost dropped it. "That's fine," he said. "We'll start with your balance." The next few days were not easy. Aelira stumbled, fell, cut her hand, and bruised her knees. She wasn't trained for battle. She was raised in fear. But every time she fell, she stood again. Even when her arms shook from holding the staff too long, she refused to stop. At night, she studied in the old archive room, reading files Jace had downloaded from ancient Earth military logs. She studied tactics, survival, even the language of commanders. Jace watched her from the shadows, noticing the change. This wasn't just survival anymore, it was transformation. One evening, he brought her a new outfit, dark armor modified to fit her form, lightweight but strong. She looked at the suit in silence, then slowly reached for it. As she put it on, her movements became sharper, her presence heavier. She didn't look like the slave girl he had found. She looked like someone meant to lead. Jace handed her a small crystal chip. "What's this?" she asked. "Proof," he said. "Royal DNA record, your family tree, your title, everything." "I thought it was lost," she whispered. "I found a fragment buried in an old Drayan embassy server," he replied. "Took me 3 nights to crack it." She stared at the chip, like it was a piece of her soul, returned to her hands. Then she did something unexpected. She tossed the chip into the fire. Jace's eyes widened. "Why?" "Because I don't want them to follow me because of my blood," she said. "If they follow me, it will be because they believe in what I become." That night, she stood outside on the top deck, facing the stars. The wind on the asteroid was thin but sharp. Her eyes scanned the constellations. She wasn't searching for safety anymore. She was choosing her battlefield. Jace walked up beside her. "You look ready," he said. "I'm not," she replied, "but I will be." Then she turned to him. "Will you follow me?" He didn't smile, just nodded once, to the end. A soft ping came from the comms panel inside. An encrypted signal was coming through. Repeating on a loop, Jace opened it, eyes narrowing as he decoded the message. Someone was calling for the heir of House Drea, not to kill her, but to serve her. A rebel cell deep inside the capital system had sent it out days ago. Hoping, just hoping, she still lived. He turned to Aelira. "You're not the only one who's done hiding," he said. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Then it's time to gather those who still remember the truth." She walked back into the outpost, her steps stronger, her shoulders square. The girl who once crawled out of a slave cage was gone. In her place walked someone else, not a princess, not a slave, but something new, something the galaxy hadn't seen in a long, long time, a leader. The rebel outpost on Varney's IX was supposed to be a secret, hidden beneath a mining colony and masked by radiation storms. It had survived unnoticed for over 6 years, but secrets never stayed buried forever, especially not when the bounty for one girl's head was high enough to buy a planet. Alira and Jace arrived under false codes and false names. The rebels checked them carefully, until one soldier scanned Alira's pulse and froze. The scanner lit up gold, not red, not green gold, the color only used for royal blood. They didn't cheer, didn't bow, they just stared. She was younger than they expected, thinner, quieter, but when she spoke, her voice held weight. "I didn't come to be served," she said. "I came to stand beside you." The rebel leader, a hardened warrior named Dara Velk, nodded slowly. "We'll follow you," she said. "But we need proof." So they set a plan. A coded message was sent out, baiting a local enforcer, loyal to the current regime. He was cruel, proud, and always hungry for glory, and when he heard whispers of a royal ghost walking Varney's 9, he came quickly with a strike team. What he didn't know was that it was all a trap. Jace helped set up the ambush, rigging the tunnels with non-lethal traps, power snares, and choke grenades. Alira stood at the center of the decoy chamber, dressed not in armor, but in the flowing red robes of her mother's line. She stood tall as the enemy charged in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. And then everything exploded, not in fire but in truth. The rebel soldiers struck with silent precision, taking down the enforcer's men in seconds. Jace pinned the commander to the wall with an electrified chain, and Alira walked toward him through the smoke, her eyes burning bright. "Who are you?" The commander spat. She didn't answer with her name. Instead, she reached into her sleeve and pulled out a broken piece of an old Drayan crown. Her fingers gripped it like steel, and she said, "I am the reason your masters will fall." The commander was dragged out screaming, but the message had already spread. Word reached the rebel channels fast. The royal bloodline lives, and she was not hiding anymore. But victory comes with risk. Someone had betrayed them, someone inside. The rebel ranks had leaked the operations location, and before they could evacuate, the sky turned black with enemy ships. They were surrounded, outgunned, and outnumbered. Jace ran to the control room and locked down the exits. "We can't win this fight," he said. Alira stared at the enemy fleet rising on the horizon. "Then, we don't fight to win," she said. "We fight to prove we exist." She walked out onto the landing platform as the first dropships arrived. The enemy soldiers poured out, but they stopped when they saw her. She raised her hand not in surrender, but in command, and behind her, the rebels followed. Not many, not strong, but ready. Then something happened that no one expected. From above, a distant rumble echoed, a third fleet dropping from warp, ships with old markings, long thought erased. The symbol of House Drea, freshly painted, glowing blue against black holes. Old loyalists, hidden for years, had heard the signal, and they had come. Missiles flew, lasers screamed, the sky burned. But on that broken landing pad, Alira stood like a flame in the wind, refusing to fall. Jace fought beside her, his rifle nearly empty, armor cracked. He looked at her and thought, this is no longer about revenge. This was the crowning of a rebellion, a moment that would be remembered long after their names were gone. And as the sun of Varney's the 9th began to rise, cutting through the fire and smoke, the girl who had once been sold in chains raised a stolen enemy flag high above her head, not as a prisoner, not as a symbol, but as a promise. The true sovereign had returned, and she had teeth. The capital world of Selenzor was not ready. Its towers rose like silver spears, untouched by war for decades. The rich dined in peace, guarded by lies. They believed the royal bloodline was long dead, buried with history, but in the shadows of the outer rings, a new name had started to echo. Ailaruth, the ghost queen, the slave-turned-sovereign, the girl who refused to stay silent inside a small stolen transport. Alira sat still, dressed in black, her crown hidden, her name erased from the ship logs. Jace sat beside her, checking the weapons, his eyes scanning every corner of the screen. They were flying straight into danger, not with an army, but with a message. If we strike the mind, she had said, the body will collapse. The plan was simple and mad. Infiltrate the high command meeting during the Unity celebration. Broadcast her face, her voice, her truth, into every home on the planet. Let the people see her not a myth, not a symbol but a living heir. They landed through maintenance tunnels under the Grand Hall. Using old blueprints from Earth archives, the guards were thin, overconfident, wearing armor like decoration. They didn't expect rebels. Not here, not now. Ailara moved fast, like wind through steel. She didn't kill, only disarmed. She struck with her staff, cracked helmets, dropped soldiers. Jace followed her lead, clearing the path with silent focus. No alarms, no delays, just movement. Every step brought them closer to the heart of the lie. In the Hall of Unity, the elite sat laughing under gold lights, nobles in robes, generals with medals, sipping wine while entire colonies starved. On a massive screen behind them, propaganda played on loop. Peace under the Protectorate, prosperity under order, royal blood is a myth. Then the screen glitched, the music stopped, and Alira's voice echoed across the room. Your peace is built on chains. Gasps filled the chamber, heads turned. The screen showed her face clear, strong, undeniable. She walked onto the stage. Flanked by rebels in stolen guard uniforms, the nobles began to panic. The generals reached for weapons, but she raised her hand and spoke. My name is Ailara of House Drea, she said. You buried my family, but you did not bury the truth. Today, the galaxy sees your lies. She reached into her belt and dropped a black box on the floor, a data core, stolen from the enemy's own vaults. Inside it, of the royal massacre, orders signed in blood, faces of the guilty. The room fell into silence. Jace held his rifle steady, heart pounding. Cameras above streamed the scene live to every screen in the capital. People watching from shops, homes, and streets saw what their rulers had hidden. Not a slave, not a rebel, but a queen returning. With fire, then came the sound of heavy boots. Elite enforcers stormed the hall, weapons raised. Jace moved forward, but Alira pushed him back. This is where I stand, she said. The first shot fired, but not from the enforcers. It came from above. One of the nobles had drawn a hidden pistol. The blast hit Ailara's side, and she staggered. Jace screamed her name. Catching her before she hit the ground, she looked up at him, eyes steady. Don't let it end here, she whispered. Rebel ships began dropping from orbit minutes later. Loyalists, awakened by her message, rose across the system. The lie had cracked in now. The truth burned like wildfire. As medics rushed in and rebel flags rose across the capital, Jace stood beside her stretcher, gripping her hand. She wasn't gone, but she was close. The price of truth had been blood, but across the stars. People whispered her name, not in fear, not in hate, but in hope. Because a girl once sold in silence had walked into the mouth of the beast and shattered its teeth with her voice. The skies above Silenzer had changed, once ruled by silver ships of oppression, now filled with rebel banners and thunder from loyalist cannons. But inside the palace infirmary, time moved differently, slower, heavier. Alira lay still, pale, against white sheets, her body broken, but not her spirit. Jace never left her side. He sat by her bed, eyes tired, armor still stained with soot and blood. Every now and then, he adjusted the machines, checked the levels, whispered her name. She hadn't spoken since the broadcast, since the bullet hit her ribs and knocked her into darkness. But her heartbeat remained steady, defiant, outside her chamber. The world had erupted. Noble houses collapsed. Governors fled. Soldiers laid down weapons and refused orders. Her message had cut deeper than any sword. She had not just exposed the lie, she had shattered the silence. Across the system, statues of false leaders were pulled down. The emblem of House Drea returned, burned into flags, inked on arms, painted over government walls. People didn't wait for orders anymore. They followed her, even as she slept. Jace stood and walked to the tall windows, looking out over the city. Flames still rose in the distance. But so did music, chants, hope. He remembered when he first saw her, small, quiet, sold in a cage like she didn't matter. Now, planets whispered her name with reverence. He turned back, just as she stirred. Her fingers twitched, her breath caught, and then, her eyes opened, slowly, painfully, but they opened. He rushed to her side, not shouting, just gripping her hand. "You made it," he said softly. Her voice came out dry, barely a whisper. "Did we win?" Jace smiled, tears in his eyes. "You didn't win," he said. "You changed everything." 2 days later, she walked onto the palace balcony, leaning on Jace's arm, dressed not in gold, not in jewels, but in simple robes, the color of the stars below her. Thousands had gathered in the square. Aliens, humans, hybrids once divided, now united under a banner of truth. She stood tall, the wind catching her hair, and when she raised her hand, the crowd fell silent. "I was once nothing," she began, her voice soft but strong. "A number, a price tag, a ghost with no name. They tried to erase me, to sell me, to silence me. But here I am," she said, "not because of my blood, but because I refused to stay broken." The crowd roared, fists rose, cheers shook the walls, but she wasn't done. "This throne is not mine alone," she said. "It belongs to those who never had a voice, to the ones still trapped in chains, to the rebels, the forgotten, the weak. No more kings without justice, no more queens without mercy. This is your future too." Jace watched her from the side, arms crossed, a quiet smile on his face. He had not saved a princess. He had stood beside a revolution. And when she turned to him, nodding, he walked forward and stood with her. Not as a hero, not as a soldier, but as the first one who believed she could rise. The galaxy did not remember the warlord who sold her, or the nobles who laughed at her, but it would always remember the girl in chains, who rose with fire in her blood, and light in her eyes, and became the sovereign of stars.